If you have topics you would like to have us discuss on the Aging Well podcast, please click on the links in the episode description to send us a text or record your message or comments. We'd love to hear from you and how we can help you age well. If you benefit from the Aging Well podcast and would like to support the content financially, please click on the Support the Show link or support our affiliates and advertisers. Welcome to the Aging Well podcast. I'm Jeff Armstrong here with Corbin Bruton. In this and the episodes that follow, we will share candid discussions on aging and hear from the experts. We are here to inform and encourage as we experience, aging. What is volume? How many repetitions? How much weight? These are questions one frequently asks when considering weight training for aging well. In this episode, we discuss the differences in training for sport versus healthy aging. Specifically, we discuss volume, intensity, and high versus low repetitions for muscle hypertrophy.
So in our previous podcast, we've spoken on the subjects of resistance training, and we've talked about a 5x5 program. We've talked about the Big Four. We've talked about the Big Five. Yeah. Excuse me.
Don't forget the deadlift.
We've talked about the overall importance of resistance training and the fact that you should do resistance training, but how much should you be lifting? Like what's the weight limit? What's the realm of that? You know, I actually came across an article, the difference between lightweight and heavyweight. And as far as the article goes, as well as a lot of other, quick search on YouTube, you can find all the same videos that'll say the same thing. And it says it really doesn't matter. What's your opinion on this?
I'd say yes and no. Yes, it doesn't matter, but yes, it matters. Depends really on our goals. We talk some about the principles of adaptation, and obviously overload is one of those. And that's what we're talking about, is how do we overload the muscle in order to stimulate growth? But we also talk about the principle of specificity. And we know that the body makes specific adaptations to impose demands. And so when we talk light versus heavy, we also have to consider what exactly are we getting from that. And a lot of those studies that are looking at light versus heavy are really just looking at hypertrophy. They're not looking at performance. And when we talk about hypertrophy, most times we're talking typically about just traditional bodybuilding, building muscle size, because that's what everybody wants. A lot of people really don't care about the strength. They want the size because it looks so good. But from a performance standpoint, we want the strength too. And so there is a difference, in my opinion, between lifting heavy and lifting light. But we have to look at what are we trying to accomplish. And this is why I think periodization is so important, cycling our training so that we are doing light versus heavy days. We are changing the rep ranges and doing those types of things in order to stimulate the muscle to grow both in size as well as strength. Because there's roughly two types of muscle hypertrophy. There's possibly three. I've seen recently they start introducing what's referred to as myofibrillar packing versus myofibrillar hypertrophy. And then there's sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. And without getting too technical, too physiological, the big differences are the sarcoplasmic hypertrophy is building the volume of the muscle without really building significantly the contractile proteins. And that's what bodybuilders are mostly going after. And that's where that high volume, where lower intensities can have a little bit better effect. Whereas when we're lifting heavy, so high intensity, fewer repetitions, we tend to favor more myofibrillar hypertrophy. And myofibrillar packing is just an idea of increasing almost only just the myofibrillar fibers, the proteins in the muscle. So getting a more stronger, denser muscle. And I don't think there's that much difference really between that and myofibrillar hypertrophy.
So would a kind of a little hybrid, like a drop set, would that be ideal? Where you're lifting really, really heavy until you're hitting a level of fatigue. And then once you hit that level of fatigue, you drop the weight itself, and then you try and get more reps in at a lower weight. And then once you hit fatigue, you drop the weight again, and then you go for a lower weight, and you just keep going until, because to me, I feel you're getting the blood flow, you're getting the time under tension on different levels. And so I feel like that would not only increase hypertrophy itself, but strength training as well as endurance on that muscle. Would that kind of be the same thing of what you're talking about?
Yeah, and I think it's really just the multiple paths to getting to the same thing. And what a lot of these articles kind of conclude is that it really comes down to kind of a combination of both volume and the degree to which you near momentary muscular failure in the muscle. And so if we bring the muscle to failure, whether we're doing high reps or lower reps, we're still stimulating the muscle to grow. And that's the key. And I think when we look at some of these articles, like the two particular articles, the studies that were cited in this paper that you had shared with me, and we'll put the links in the description notes, they really didn't look at really high intensity. They were looking at high rep range and higher rep range. They didn't really look at low rep range. So they weren't really looking in the 5 or below range of repetitions. And that makes a difference as well. So what they were looking at is, traditionally when we talk about hypertrophy, we must always say 8 to 12 repetitions. And they were looking at more repetitions, so really like 15 or higher repetitions as being a stimulus for hypertrophy. And honestly, I think you could go either way with any of those. It comes down to a bit more of comfort. How comfortable do you feel with that high volume and very little rest in between? And in the end, you're kind of accomplishing the same thing with just multiple different ways. You mentioned like a breakdown set or drop sets where you do as many repetitions as you can at a certain weight. You drop the weight, you do some more. You drop the weight, you do some more. And eventually you get to the point where either the bar is unloaded or you are just in such agonizing pain that you can't do any more. A challenge with that is it takes a lot more to recover from that. And so your training frequency might be a bit less than if you did a more moderate volume of work, still kind of going to failure within those sets, but then being able to recover from those. There are countless other ways to accomplish this. I've seen things like, just 100 rep sets where you do kind of the same thing, where you just do as many reps as you can, pause for about 15 seconds, do as many more reps as you can until you accomplish 100 reps. There's, what's the phrase? There's, many ways to kill a horse or something like that. I don't think that's the right phrase, but the point there is that there's many ways to accomplish this, and best to kind of try different ones and see which ones work most effectively for you. I discussed my epigenetics test with True Diagnostic co-founder Hannah Wendt in episode 162. Epigenetic testing measures baseline and changes in your pace of aging, giving you the power to steer your anti-aging or health and wellness journey in the right direction. I learned that I am aging well. Click on the affiliate link in the episode description, use the promo code AGEWELL, and receive a 12% discount on your epigenetics test and monitor your pace of aging.
Well, the reason why I asked is, we've throughout the years, we've been told, like, if you lift heavy, you can build strength. And if you want to lean and tone out, you just lift light and just go higher reps. But it seems to me, I agree with you. Based on the science, it kind of just depends on what your goals are. It looks like you can create muscle hypertrophy with lighter weights if you are doing a lot of reps and you're getting that blood flow in. As far as that drop set thing, the reason why I kind of brought that up is I had watched an old interview from the 90s with Mike Metzer, and he talked about that. That's what he put in his training regimen. And you mentioned the rest period. He was saying he was in and out of the gym within 45 minutes, maybe 50 at maximum, while other people he was competing against, they were going in for that 2-hour window. And he was only training 3 days a week versus his competitors that were training the 5 days a week. So let's kind of dive into that. Let's talk about the importance of resting in between sets, rest and recovery.
Okay, well, there's a lot to go to with that.
Okay.
And I think I've mentioned in previous podcasts that, I got my start in Nautilus. So Mike Metzer is, somebody I know very well from the training aspect, and the type of training that he did and that Art Jones and Ellington Darden really promoted is going to get you hypertrophy.
Right.
It's going to get you bigger. And it's, again, you're going to that point of fatigue. Art Jones used to say that, you can kill an elephant with, a shotgun, shooting him 1,000 times. I don't know if that's the exact quote, but isn't it better to use an elephant gun and get him with one shot? And that was the whole thing, is like, it was much more time effective and efficient to build the muscle with that one set, just totally exhausting the muscle. But again, we're talking about hypertrophy more in the sarcoplasmic end than in the myofibrillar end. And so when we're talking about building strength, we want to train for strength. And yeah, you increase your strength because you're increasing the intensity as you progress. And you can progress fairly well with the Nautilus training, but it's going to, you're going to be limited. You don't work your way up to the top of the stack really quickly doing that type of training. You may not even do much more weight the next time you come into the gym. You're again taking it to failure. You might do 1 or 2 more repetitions, or you might go up, 2.5, 5 pounds and do that same just exhaustive set. And it works, but I don't know that it has the best transference when we start looking at performance, when we're talking about speed, power, explosiveness, balance, many of those different things that we might talk about in terms of sports performance. And I want to point out too that when we talk performance, this is an aging well podcast. We're not talking about lifting for athletic performance, but we are lifting for essentially just simply human performance for aging well. The things that are going to help us to be able to perform our activities of daily living better and longer and as pain-free as possible.
So with that, especially with the fatigue portion, I feel like recovery, it's not just going to be the rest period in between sets or the rest period in between your next workout, but I feel like, nutrition is going to play a huge part in that as well, right? As far as recovery, if you're breaking down the muscles, you want to refeed them so they can fuel up again, whether that's protein or the amino acids of what the protein actually breaks down into.
Well, and it's the carbohydrates and the fats as well that provide us with the energy to resynthesize adenosine triphosphate, which is most important really for performance. If we want the muscles to be able to be fully recovered, the fuel sources have to be replenished, as well as the muscle fibers being repaired in order to be able to do the next training session. And so when I talk about recovery, I like looking at the kind of key volumes that people like Mike Israetel promote, which we have what is referred to as the maximum recoverable volume. That's the amount of work that you do in a single session or training period that you can recover from and be able to come back to your next session or next training period and be able to do the prescribed work. And so if I'm squatting heavy and I just do a really exhaustive set on Monday to where I do, breakdowns and where my legs are like jello, I train like a, Mike Metzger kind of workout. or I just completely exhaust my muscles. And then they come into the next training session. So say Wednesday now I'm scheduled to do legs again, and I can't lift as much weight. My legs are fatigued. I can hardly move them. Then I haven't recovered fully from that. And so I'm not going to be able to do as much in that training session, which is going to ultimately then impede my progression, because the training stimulus needs to be overloaded over time progressively. And so an important factor to consider is how long is it going to take us to fully recover from that activity we're doing? And if we're doing too much, then we have to do a little bit less so that we can recover from that. And in the other volumes that he talks about, we have the minimum effective volume, is how much work we minimally need to do to be able to stimulate some level of growth. And then there is minimum recoverable volume, which is how much we need just to simply maintain what we have accomplished. And then you have the kind of maximum adaptive volume, is how much volume is going to give you the most amount of adaptation within a training session. And it gets a little bit more complicated. We could probably almost do a whole podcast on those. But the key there is that we have to be somewhere between that minimum effective volume and the maximum recoverable volume in order to stimulate any kind of growth. And I misspoke. The other volume is maintenance volume. That's the minimum that we need just to simply maintain what we have gained. And we can't be focused on pushing every muscle group to the fullest every workout, or we're going to need much, much more recovery there. And that's where, the high intensity type of training that Mike Metzer was doing required no more really than 3 sessions per week. In fact, in some of the training, they spoke of doing only like once a week. I mean, it was so intensive. But again, the more you're having to spread out those training stimuli, the less adaptation you're going to ultimately see over time. And so we're trying to find that optimal training stimulus so that we can recover from it, we can see growth from it, and we can still function from it. We can still move around without being just, a pool of sweat on the floor. And so we want to be in between there, but we don't always want to be training at that maximum effective volume or maximum recoverable volume, because then we're always right on the edge of overreaching, overtraining, and the body eventually is going to begin to break down, which we're more likely for injury. We're more likely for, damage to the connective tissues and those types of things. And so we generally want to be cycling through this period of minimum effective volume up to maximum recoverable volume throughout cycles, and doing that in order to maximize and optimize the training response. If that makes any sense.
I agree with almost everything you said. The one part that I did disagree with is if you do a really, really heavy set and then you come in a day later, or 2 days later, and you're like really sore and you're like, man, I can't lift that much. I think the importance of saying, hey, we need those muscles to recover so we can lift just as much. I think that is the main take-home message. What I have seen a lot is a lot of people, they'll work out. They're like, I want to get into a habit. I want to get into a routine. And then they go to the gym and then they work out, and then the DOMS effects happens and they get really sore and they're like, whew, not going to lift today. I need another day to recover. And then the next day they're even more sore. And so they have it in their head, man, I'm really sore. I can't work out. I gotta rest and recover. What I've actually noticed is if you can push it through that soreness and get more blood flow to those sore areas, you recover a lot faster. Now, we're talking 2 different things, right? We're talking the level of fatigue, actually absolutely fatiguing yourself and going to the point of exhaustion versus, hey, we're getting into a new routine and we're having muscle soreness. Oh, I should probably rest another day. I think that's where people get confused, not knowing the difference when they're in their early stages of their exercise journey.
Okay. So you're not disagreeing with
I'm not disagreeing with you.
what you said you were.
Only on the one part as far as
No, there's nothing to disagree with. I mean, what you're talking about is not the same thing.
right.
What you're talking about is somebody's mental capacity to come in and push through that delayed onset muscle soreness.
Correct.
That is not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is, okay, they're that sore, they come in, they're able to push through it, but they can't complete the 5 sets of 5 repetitions and that particular exercise because the muscles lack the capacity to produce that force. That's where the maximum recoverable volume comes into play. That means you've overreached, potentially overtraining. And we'll talk about overtraining, overreaching here in a moment. But that delayed onset muscle soreness is just simply the immune system response to the damage imposed on the muscle. So when people are more likely to see delayed onset muscle soreness, it's when they're new to an exercise and they're doing something that has a very large eccentric component to it. And so with the eccentric contraction, there's much more opportunity for the muscles to be disrupted and fibers to be kind of, for lack of better phrasing, we always say kind of torn. I mean, it sounds bad damage, but that's actually good damage to the muscle because that's what triggers the adaptive response. And so when we have that immune system response, yeah, the body's kind of saying, don't do this again because it's going to hurt. But if we push through it and complete the workout, then we're going to promote that healing much more rapidly. And eventually we build up a bit more resistance to that muscle damage. And so that's a bit different, saying, that we can't do it because it hurts.
But I can see one of our novice listeners who are just getting into that routine. I can see them listening to this and be like, well, I worked out yesterday and I'm really sore. I'm definitely not going to be able to exert the same amount of force that I did yesterday. So I'm going to take a rest day, when in reality, no, you can push through it. It's tough because you may not be used to it because you're new in this journey. Just like you were when you were a baby, you were new walking, but you still attempted it every day. And now you walk like it's second nature, literally. So just kind of push through that uncomfortableness.
Well, and I would say too, for somebody who is looking to resistance train to age well, the goal is not to be damaging your muscles so badly that you feel like you can't do the next workout. You want the dose of so that it is enough of a stimulus to be able to promote growth, and uncomfortable enough that when you come in the next workout, you're feeling it some, but you're promoting that growth. And so, yeah, we got to be careful. And that's where I think sometimes when we get into some of these workouts where it's taking it to such extreme failure that you can lose people because they feel like that's how you have to lift in order to be able to, grow the muscle, or that's the only way to lift.
So you mentioned carbs as part of the recovery portion. I know the answer, but for someone that doesn't know and they're like, oh, okay, he said carbs, I'm going to eat a big thing of pasta, or I'm going to eat that thing of bread, or maybe he meant simple carbs. Maybe I'm just going to eat a bunch of fruit. Maybe I'm going to add juice to my protein shake. You want to go a little bit more into detail about carbohydrates, because in today's world, carbs either have a phenomenal rep or they have a bad rep, depending on the literature that you're actually reading.
Okay, so you really want to get away from talking about these number of repetitions and the volume of work and go now to carbs. I mean, just to keep it, carbs, there's good carbs and there's bad carbs, but again, we don't want to label things as good and bad. There are those that are going to be more effective for promoting adaptation, and those that are going to be more or less beneficial to your health. But when it comes down to it, from the muscle standpoint, a carb is a carb. I mean, glucose is glucose. And muscle doesn't care where it comes from, but what the muscle cares about is when it comes. And the best time to really be consuming your carbohydrates are going to be in the proximity of your workout, where muscle, it's not going to matter whether it's, just pure sugar or whether it's coming from fruits or whether it's coming from some healthy starch. Those carbs need to be available when you get the insulin spike post exercise, and the carbs are going to be drawn into the muscle. That's going to pull protein in as well. And that's going to replenish the muscle glycogen and allow for the amino acids to get into the muscle to be able to synthesize new muscle tissue. So when we talk about the muscle needing carbs, the muscle needs the carbohydrates in order to fuel the muscle contraction, because that's metabolically the most effective way to fuel and to replenish the ATP as opposed to using fat. And so when we build up glycogen in the muscle has more stored to be able to do the work. And so we can do more work, which means we stimulate more growth, more adaptation, but then we have to replenish that. And so we need carbs to replenish that. And the more we eat our carbs around our workouts and then limit it kind of through the rest of the day, then the less likely we are for those carbs to go into fat storage. And that's kind of a simple, without going into a 2-hour lecture on carbohydrate metabolism.
No, it was great. It was perfect.
That's where we're at.
But it kind of dives back into the reps. If you're fueling it with carbohydrates and you're getting an adequate amount of protein, again, is that more ideal for super heavy lifting in that light rep range? Or is that going to be more for that higher rep range, lighter weight, higher rep range? Because you're like, man, if I go super, super heavy, do I have a little bit more in the tank because of the carbohydrates that are in there? Because of that glycogen storage, do I have a little bit more even though I can't lift? And is that where that hybrid training comes in? Or would it be more ideal to say, well, I only have these little 5-pound weights. I'm going to do 100 reps of everything at that point. You got your fuel stores, right? You got your carbohydrates, you got your protein, you're fueling the muscles. You're also taking it in after your workout. So you're in that recovery state. Now it's the next day. Okay, so you've just replenished the muscles from the previous workout before. You're ready to go again the next day. Are you more ready for a heavier set with light reps, or are you more prepared for a lightweight, heavier rep?
Well, I'd say if you have fully topped off the muscle with muscle glycogen, so the muscle is fed, it's got its protein, it's got its carbohydrates stored up, you're ready for anything. And it doesn't matter what you're doing because, and again, without getting too exercise physiology lecture here, the key currency for muscle growth, the energy for muscle growth comes from the adenosine triphosphate, the ATP. And that's what we need in order to perform any kind of muscle contraction. So whether, we're eating a high fat diet, low carb diet, high carb diet, low fat diet, carnivorous, protein only, paleo diet, whatever it might be, the muscle doesn't care. It just needs the ATP. And the ATP, the adenosine triphosphate that is stored in the muscle, is only enough for probably about 8 to 10 seconds of muscle contraction. And then if we have creatine phosphate present, this is where creatine loading and, the supplement creatine can benefit us when we're exercising. That's going to give us an extra little bit of time in there. So 15 seconds is a, kind of top of the ATP storage is maybe 3 repetitions, 4 repetitions, maybe up to that 5 repetition kind of maximum point. And then we're drained and we've fatigued the muscle. So we've completely exhausted that ATP. We still need the carbohydrates in order to replenish that. And so even if I'm going in lifting very heavy weights, and when we talk heavy weights, we got to be clear that we're talking relative intensity, closest to our maximum. So how much we can lift for only, 1 to 3 repetitions would be considered are really, really heavy. Light is stuff that we can do almost indefinitely. And there's some kind of spectrum in between that, or continuum between that. And so when we're looking at going really heavy, we're going to deplete that ATP, but it needs to be replenished. And so where's it going to get that? It's going to get it from the glycogen that's stored in the muscle. Muscle is going to break that down, replenish that during the recovery period between sets. And this is why you can't just go, lift 3 repetitions of a really heavy, high intensity weight and then take 30 seconds rest and then go right back at it. Whereas when we are doing lighter reps and we're doing or lighter weights and we're doing higher repetitions, we can accomplish more of those reps in a shorter period of time, because as we are doing those reps, we are utilizing the muscle glycogen. This is where we build up lactic acid, and we're replenishing those as we're doing exercise. So you can do a set where you take 15 seconds in between and then go do the more repetitions. And so the glycogen needs to be there, but it's not going to care what you're doing. It just needs to replenish that. And so if you're doing heavy weights, the glycogen is going to be utilized and oxygen is going to be utilized in between those sets.
So it really doesn't matter light or heavy weight, as long as
your muscles are fueled. No, it's not going to matter. And this is, I think, where volume becomes important. And we don't talk about volume enough. I think a lot of people who are just kind of beginner and novice lifters don't even understand what volume is. But when we talk about equating the volume, so I can do, volume is basically just the number of repetitions times the weight. And so if I do 10 repetitions of 100 pounds, what is that? 1,000 pounds, right? There's no other units for volume. So my volume is 1,000. If I do 1,000 pounds for 1 repetition, that's still the same volume. Now, are those two extremes going to produce the same type and level of hypertrophy? No. But I can tell you, if I can do 1,000 pounds one time, probably already have the muscle mass there to be able to do that. But that is still going to stimulate some level of growth. It's more likely to just be myofibrillar hypertrophy. But it's really much more neurological from that standpoint. But somewhere in that middle of that spectrum, if the volumes are the same, the volumes are equated, and we're taking the sets to failure, which means that last repetition of the last set is really the last that we can do, we are going to see comparable amounts of muscle growth, maybe a little bit different in terms of the nature of the muscle growth. But the key is that we are taking all those muscle fibers and fatiguing them in the exercise session.
So in that case, is it just, I would say the take-home message would be to just kind of switch up your routine. Break it down where one day, say you're on a 3-day-a-week workout routine. One of your days, that's your heavy and hard day. You say you're running a 5x5 program. Well, you're doing the actual 5x5 where your last 2 reps are so challenging because I can't lift that much anymore because I'm pushing myself to the absolute exhaustion with the heaviness of the weight that I've chosen. And then your next 2 days, you're going to be either in that 8 to 10 or 8 to 12 or maybe 12 to 15, like a higher rep range. Because it seems to me that the take home message is, as far as volume goes, switch it up. Right? Have your body adapt and adjust to this.
And there's countless ways that you can switch that up. I mean, there's the more classical periodization where you have cycles where you're doing more hypertrophy to where you're doing more strength, where you're doing more power. You can do that across the year. You can do it across the month. You can do it across the week. I mean, I've done workouts where, in a 6 sessions, so doing a split body routine. First 2 sessions are going to be more higher repetitions, maybe 13 to 15 reps. Middle sessions would be in the more moderate range, maybe 8 to 10 repetitions. And then the last 2 sessions might be in the 5 to 7 range. So I'm working more hypertrophy or muscle endurance, more hypertrophy, more strength. across the week. That's one way to do it, and that can work as well. You can do it even within the session too, where you do, one thing I've been using a lot more frequently, and I actually like doing, is doing 5 sets of weights that are going to be somewhere between my minimum effective volume, or that intensity, and a maximum volume. I shouldn't say volume. I'm really talking maximum intensity. So say I'm doing, squats, and start at, one weight, add 20 pounds, do my second set, add another 20 pounds, do another set, add another 20 in. And, I get to my top set that should be strenuous enough. I'm building strength because I'm pushing that up each session. And then I drop the weight back down, maybe 20, 40 pounds, and do as many reps as possible. And I was prompted by one individual to, try doing that with like 17 repetitions for that final set. And I'm finding much better hypertrophy with that and much better strength gains. So that's another way to do it. You can do myosets. Myosets are where you do a weight that generally should fatigue you at about 12 repetitions. You do as many reps as possible, and then you rest for about 5 seconds, and you do as many reps as possible again, and you do, no more than 5 sets of those, but by the final set, you're really fatigued. So you're just doing as many reps as you can in that period of time. I've done workouts where the goal is to do 100 repetitions, no matter how you do them. It could be done, all one set of 100 repetitions, or you can, do a bit more of a breakdown kind of routine with it, or, more of a myoset kind of routine, or you can do 40, 30, 20, 10 repetitions. So there's tons of different ways that we can do this. The key is find what works for you, what you like doing and you're going to do, and do it. And, don't beat yourself up so bad that you can't come in the next workout. And these workouts can be done relatively short period of time. I don't prefer to work out more than about 45. I don't have time to work out more than about 45 minutes to an hour, when I'm doing the weights.
You mentioned how you can change your frequency, or not frequency. You can change your volume, switch it up, not just in your workout routine or in your week, but throughout the year. And I'm kind of curious. I've always kind of wondered this, and this is just a actual question. I know a lot of people during the wintertime, they start taking in a lot more calories, and they're trying to do their bulk so they can cut and lean out during summer. But wouldn't it make more sense to flip that? Because
why does it make a difference?
Well, the way I say it, it's colder during wintertime. Your body kind of adapts to that coldness. And let's just say you're doing, higher reps, or you're adding more cardio in. Well, with the coldness, wouldn't you be able to take in more oxygen? And wouldn't you be able to, I don't know, like burn fat better in the wintertime? I know it doesn't make sense how I'm saying it, but to me, in my mind, I feel like it does, because I feel like when you're doing the cuts and it's summertime and it's way hotter, I don't know. I feel like I fatigue a lot more during summertime workouts than I would during a wintertime workout. And I feel like ideally pushing yourself in the wintertime I think it's way easier to push yourself during wintertime when it's colder versus in summertime when it's hot. I feel like I hit a different level of fatigue during summertime. Am I the only one? Do you not have that issue?
Well, there's a lot there. And, my sarcastic response would be like, who the F cares? Does it really matter? Because the whole point is, if you're doing, first of all, for our population, the aging well population that we're trying to reach, I don't want to promote this whole idea of bulking and cutting, because I think it's just plain stupid. Unless you're a bodybuilder that is trying to amass as much muscle mass as possible, And in order to do that, you have to be in such a caloric excess that you're going to put on some fat that you're going to ultimately have to cut in order for competition. Our goal should be to maximize muscle mass while optimizing fat and not be going through these cycles of gain and diet and gain and diet and whatever. It may be we should be kind of getting to a point where it becomes much more of a just ongoing maintenance type of program. And so, when it comes to cutting versus massing, it really comes down to when do you need to do it? And for many of our listeners, that optimal time to be the leanest is going to be in the summertime when they're in their bathing suits at the beach. And so who
Right.
wants to be putting on fat mass and bulking up in the summertime and looking pudgy in their Speedos, only to be lean in the wintertime?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Start the routine of being lean, like start that movement. And then by the time you hit summertime, you're all lean and ready to go versus starting it in springtime. And then you're not as lean as you'd like to be.
So I'm still not following where you're starting this, but, it takes time to lose fat. So you need to just kind of back it off from when you want to be at that optimal fat level and go with that time. It's not going to make a huge difference whether you do it wintertime, springtime, summertime, whatever. The key is to just simply get on a diet that is going to be optimal to your health. And it's going to keep you at a more optimal body composition year round. I don't like the idea of getting people into this notion of kind of fattening up in the wintertime or thinning down in the summertime. I think just kind of keep it more optimal. Now, that being said, I think the wintertime is a little bit easier to boost the metabolic rate because when we are exposed to the cold, our body shivers. That shivering is muscular contraction. That is generating energy or expending energy in order to heat the body. And we're going to actually, if we are in a pretty much stable caloric state throughout the year, you're more likely than to lose body fat in the wintertime because of shivering. Because if you're eating the same as you did in the summertime, but you're shivering more, you're expending more energy in order to maintain that body heat. And so you're going to lose fat. Now, whether or not metabolically or, hormonally, our bodies don't adjust to that in order to conserve that body fat, to conserve the body heat, is, kind of probably left to be studied a little bit more. And I'm sure it's much more individualized. But again, we can get really wrapped up in the genetics, the epigenetics, and all the different factors that contribute to how well we can boost our metabolism or not boost our metabolism to maintain a healthy body fat. But the key should be to just eat healthy year round, try and maintain a healthy body composition year round, and be trying to build muscle mass throughout the year. Now, that being all said, the cycles of hypertrophy and strength and power and those types of things, when we look at like sports performance, are most definitely associated more with the cycle of the training and of the competition. So football players right now, this is high school football in Oregon. I think last night was probably the last game for many of the teams. Our Westland Lions will be going on into the playoffs and hopefully probably have a few more weeks, maybe a month left of football. But, for high school, college, football is going to end somewhere between beginning of November and, beginning of January for college. The pros, how late do they play? Into February for the Super Bowl. But so once that season is over, now the training shifts to, okay, I got to get bigger and stronger for next season. And so after a period of kind of recovery, you're going to get into more of a hypertrophy cycle. And then that's your time to really just boost up as much muscle mass and weight gain as possible. And then you start cycling toward more power as you get closer to your season. Bodybuilders are going to, try and cycle up that hypertrophy. Generally, start right after a competition, start getting bigger, bigger, and bigger. And then they're going to have to back off in terms of their cut phase, usually 12 weeks out from a competition so that they can get lean. But you can't get too fat in that because then you have more you have to lose, and then that takes away from your opportunity to gain weight. So, where we do it is going to depend on the sport you're looking at. When they had, working with the local wrestling team, we really focused on hypertrophy at a period of time when anybody that was playing football was really starting to look toward getting into more of their power explosiveness type of training and couldn't be focusing in on hypertrophy. And, that would be we started a little bit late, but it was, basically June through into about September. And then now now the season is getting ready to start, looking at that more explosive type of training. Now, again, to the aging well population, you don't have to have that regular of a cycle, but you need to have periods of hypertrophy, building strength, because the strength allows you to lift more, which means you can do more during those hypertrophy phases and build more hypertrophy. The hypertrophy gives us because we're doing such high volume, is going to give us the muscular endurance, the work capacity that will allow us to recover more effectively from the heavy lifting when we get into strength. So everything feeds everything else. It's this kind of constant cycle of improved performance that we benefit from by cycling our training.
But aren't we all in the aging well population?
Yes, we are. But
aren't we
our goals are going to be a little bit different. The bulk of the aging well population are not going to be training toward sport performance.
Gotcha.
Very few. I mean, we look at how many high school athletes actually go on to play college ball or, college sports, and then even smaller number going on to be professional athletes. So most of us, we are training just to be healthy and to age well.
Gotcha. Okay. I see what you're saying. I was thinking, if we're going to age well, push ourselves, because I think I just have that old sport athlete mentality still, even though I'm in my 30s and I don't play sports at this time. But when I am in the gym or I am doing that workout routine, I still have, I got to push myself through this, push through my limits. I really don't want to. Suck it up. I'm doing it anyways, right? And so pushing forward and seeing what the body is capable of, as well as what your mind is capable of. Because a lot of times your body's going to say, okay, buddy, we're done. Like, no more. But your mind, you just got to power through it. And that's my approach on it. But you're right. I think for the aging well population it's not just, I'm going to go in the gym and kill myself. This is not just a workout routine. This is a lifestyle that I have chosen to better myself and add that longevity onto my life so I can share these moments with my future kids or my future grandkids or whatever the case may be. And I can experience all the wonders that this world have because I'm healthy enough to live it.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah. And again, we talk in terms of athletic performance. I think a key thing to stress repeatedly is that we should not be training like athletes.
Right.
Athletes are not training to age well. They are training for immediate performance, being able to do well at whatever their sport is. And it puts a lot of stress and a lot of toll on the body that ultimately they're going to have to recover from in order to age well. That being said, we as aging well adults should be training in a way that is progressively overloading our system, making us stronger, allowing us to maintain those fitness parameters as long as possible. But we have to be aware that pushing too hard has its stresses on the joints and on the tendons and ligaments, and that could cause us more harm than good. And so really optimizing that volume of work that we're doing, the frequency of the work that we're doing, and whether we opt to go lighter weights, higher repetitions, or heavier weights and fewer repetitions, shouldn't really matter as long as we're accomplishing the goals that we're doing. And it should address the goals that we have. Now, an advantage to lifting lighter is that it is less stressful on the joints. The disadvantages to it is not as stressful on the joints, because we want a certain level of stress on the joints so that the joints get stronger, maintain that health, tendons and ligaments get stronger, but we don't want to overstress it. And so there may be times when lifting lighter is going to be more beneficial. There's going to be times when lifting heavier is going to be more beneficial. And we've talked about blood flow restriction training. I think that is kind of an optimal middle of the ground kind of training for hypertrophy, because it really significantly reduces the load on the joints, but stimulates the muscles much more like higher intensity training is going to do. So that is an option as well.
And is that because with the lack of blood flow, there's a lack of oxygen? So it's producing more lactic acid, or is it?
It's essentially producing kind of the same metabolites, but at a lower intensity level. And so because the blood is occluded and those metabolites build up in the muscle is essentially perceiving that it is lifting at a much higher intensity. So all those little cellular triggers to stimulate hypertrophy get kicked in, and we end up recruiting more fast twitch muscle fibers than we would at that same intensity without the occlusion.
Oh, that's all right. Okay. Anything else?
I don't think so. I think we kind of danced around this bush a little bit today, but hopefully we came to something conclusive for individuals. But again, the key is don't fret on the reps and the intensities that you're doing, as long as you are doing an intensity that is sufficient enough to bring that muscle close to a fatiguing point, and you can recover from it, and you're getting proper rest, you're getting sleep, you're getting proper nutrition, and you're training regularly, then you'll be aging well.
Wonderful. And that's the goal. Always age well.
Thank you for listening. I hope you benefited from today's podcast. And until next time, keep aging well.